The Montana prairie stretched out like a punishment, endless, colorless, and cruel under the late autumn sky. Clara Whitmore had stopped crying 3 days ago. There were no tears left. Her body had become a machine designed for one purpose: keep moving forward, keep Eli breathing, don't stop until you find shelter or death finds you first. The boy in her arms weighed almost nothing now. 4 years old and burning with fever, his small body had become a collection of sharp angles and shallow breaths. His lips were cracked and bleeding. When he opened his eyes, which wasn't often anymore, they held a glassy confusion that terrified her more than his silence. "Mama?" he whispered against her collarbone. The word came out like sandpaper. "Shh, baby. Save your strength." She didn't tell him they were lost. She didn't tell him the last town had threatened to run them out with dogs if they didn't leave by sundown. She didn't tell him that she'd spent their final coins on a piece of stale bread 2 days ago, or that her own vision had started swimming with dark spots that wouldn't go away. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of dirt and distance. Claire's boots, Thomas's old boots, really, 3 sizes too big and stuffed with newspaper, dragged through the dust. Each step felt like lifting stones. Her dress, once a respectable gray cotton, hung on her frame like a burial shroud, stained with road dirt and sweat and the residue of 100 desperate miles. She'd been beautiful once. Thomas had told her so on their wedding day, his eyes bright with whiskey and hope. That felt like a lifetime ago. Now she was 26 and looked 40, her dark hair matted against her skull, her cheekbones jutting out like accusations. The fever had taken Thomas in 4 days. One morning he'd been fine, laughing, planning their route west, talking about the ranch they'd build. By evening he couldn't stand. By the second day he couldn't speak. On the 4th morning, Clara had woken up next to a corpse. She'd buried him herself in the hard Oklahoma earth, Eli watching silently from the wagon. The town preacher had refused to say words over the grave. "Can't spare the time for drifters," he'd said, not unkindly, just honest. After that, everything had fallen apart like wet paper. The wagon had broken an axle outside Dodge City. Clara had sold it for scrap, along with everything they owned except what they could carry. She'd tried to find work, washing, cooking, mending, anything, but every door had closed in her face. A woman alone with a child was trouble. Everyone knew that. Bad luck. A burden. "We don't hire your kind," one saloon owner had said, looking her up and down, "unless you're interested in different work." His smile had made her skin crawl. She'd run. Town after town, the same story: rejection, suspicion, contempt. The money ran out, the food ran out. Then Eli had started coughing, and the cough had turned into fever, and now she was dying on her feet in the middle of nowhere, and her son was dying in her arms. The sun was setting when she saw the fence. At first she thought it was a hallucination. The dark spots in her vision had been getting worse, sometimes showing her things that weren't there: water, trees, Thomas standing in the road ahead. But the fence remained solid as she stumbled closer. Weathered wood posts, 3 rails high, stretching out in both directions as far as she could see. Beyond it, maybe half a mile distant, stood a house. Not a house, a ranch. Low-slung buildings clustered around a main structure, corrals and outbuildings visible in the fading light. Smoke rose from a chimney. Real smoke, real people. Clara's legs almost gave out from relief. "Eli." She shook him gently. His eyes fluttered open. "Baby, look, a house. We're going to be okay." He didn't respond. His breathing had gone shallow and rapid. Clara climbed through the fence rails, her dress catching and tearing. She didn't care. The house. Just get to the house. Someone there would help. They had to. Even frontier people had basic human decency. Even out here, they wouldn't turn away a sick child. Would they? The doubt crept in as she walked, but she pushed it down. No choice. No other options. This was the end of the line. The main house grew larger as she approached. A solid structure, better built than most frontier dwellings. Somebody with money lived here, or at least somebody who knew how to work. The corrals held horses, good ones from what she could see. Cattle grazed in distant fields. Clara's heart lifted slightly. Wealthy meant generous. Wealthy meant they could afford to help. She made it to the porch steps before her legs finally quit. The world tilted sideways. She felt herself falling, tried to twist so Eli wouldn't hit the ground, and then everything went black. Caleb Mercer was checking the cinch on his saddle when he heard the dogs start barking. Not their usual bark, the lazy warning they gave when coyotes got too close to the livestock. This was different, urgent, almost confused. He straightened, his hand automatically going to the rifle leaning against the barn wall. 6 years alone on this ranch had taught him to trust the dog's instincts better than his own. "Boss?" Miguel appeared from the bunkhouse, his hand on his gun. The other ranch hands were filtering out behind him, alert. "Stay put," Caleb said. "I'll check it." He walked toward the main house, rifle loose in his grip, eyes scanning. The sunset cast everything in shades of blood and gold. Nothing moved except the wind and the dogs circling something near the porch. Then he saw her. A woman, collapsed at the bottom of his steps like something discarded. Her dress was filthy, her hair wild. For a moment, Caleb thought she was dead. Then he saw her chest moving, barely, but moving, and she was holding something. Caleb approached slowly, rifle still ready. Frontier rule number 1, trust nothing that shows up uninvited. He'd seen con artists, thieves, and worse use women as bait. His nearest neighbor was 15 miles away. Out here, you made your own law. He nudged her shoulder with his boot. "Lady, you alive?" She didn't respond. He crouched down, keeping the rifle across his knees, and got a better look at what she was holding. A child. Jesus Christ. The boy couldn't have been more than 4 or 5, thin as a scarecrow and burning up with fever. His lips were moving silently, and his skin had that gray undertone that meant serious trouble. Caleb sat back on his heels, jaw tight. This was exactly the kind of complication he'd moved out here to avoid. People were problems. People asked for things. People died on you when you weren't ready, and then you spent the rest of your life trying to outrun the memory. He should turn them away. Send them to town. Let someone else deal with it. The boy's eyes opened, bright blue, unfocused, and stared directly at Caleb. "Please," the kid whispered. Just that one word, barely audible. Something in Caleb's chest cracked. He stood up fast, angry at himself, angry at the situation, angry at whatever cruel God had dropped these two on his doorstep. "Miguel, get over here!" The foreman came running. He stopped short when he saw the woman and child. "Madre de Dios. Get Doc Harrison. Ride hard. Tell him it's urgent." "Doc's in Billings for the week, boss. Won't be back until—" "Then get Martha Henley. She knows medicine." Miguel hesitated. "Martha don't come out this far after dark. You know how she is." Caleb's jaw clenched. "Then I guess we're doing this ourselves." He handed the rifle to Miguel and bent down, scooping the woman up in one arm and the boy in the other. They weighed nothing. The woman's head lolled against his shoulder, and up close he could see she was younger than he'd first thought. Maybe mid-20s, pretty, under the dirt and exhaustion. He kicked that thought away immediately. Inside the house, he laid them on the sofa in the front room. The one piece of furniture Sarah had insisted on buying back when this place was supposed to become a home instead of a prison. The fabric was dusty now, barely used in 6 years. Caleb lit lamps, then stood back and assessed the situation like he was dealing with injured livestock. Clinical. Detached. The boy was the priority. Fever, dehydration, possibly pneumonia. The woman was just exhausted and starved. She'd live if she rested. He went to the kitchen and pumped water into a basin, grabbed clean rags, then returned to the front room. The boy's forehead was hot enough to fry eggs. Caleb dipped a rag in cool water and pressed it to the kid's head. The boy whimpered. "I know," Caleb muttered. "Just hold on." He worked mechanically, cooling the fever, getting water between the boy's cracked lips a few drops at a time, checking for other injuries. The kid's breathing was rough, but not critical. Not yet, anyway. Behind him, the woman stirred. Caleb glanced back. Her eyes were open, dark brown, sharp despite the exhaustion. She looked around wildly, panic flooding her face, then locked onto the boy. "Eli, he's alive," Caleb said curtly. "Fever's bad, but he'll make it if you don't move him." She tried to sit up anyway, failed. Her arms shook with the effort. "I said don't move." "Who are you?" Her voice was hoarse, wrecked. "The man whose porch you collapsed on." Caleb wrung out another rag. "What the hell were you thinking, dragging a sick kid across the prairie?" We were trying to reach town." "Town's 20 miles north. You were heading east." Her face crumpled. "I got lost." "Yeah, I figured." She watched him work on Eli for a moment, her eyes tracking every movement like she expected Caleb to hurt him. "Why are you helping us?" Good question. Caleb didn't have a good answer. "Because you're here," he said finally, "and because I'm not a complete bastard. Most men would have left us on the porch. Most men are idiots." Despite everything, she almost smiled. Then her face went serious again. "I can pay you. Once we get to... You don't have any money. I can work. I'm a good cook. I can clean, mend clothes, tend a garden. I don't need help. Please." The word broke on the way out. "I'll do anything. Just don't send us away. Not until Eli's better, please." Caleb looked at her properly for the first time. She was holding herself together through sheer will, her whole body vibrating with the effort of not falling apart, pride and desperation fighting each other behind her eyes. He recognized that look. He'd seen it in the mirror often enough. "What's your name?" Clara Whitmore." "Where's your husband?" "Dead 2 weeks ago. Fever took him in Oklahoma." "Family?" "None that'll help." Something bitter crossed her face. "Thomas had a brother, Randall. He's complicated." "Complicated how?" "The kind of complicated that ends with lawyers and threats." She closed her eyes. "We were running from him when Eli got sick." Caleb absorbed that. A widow, a sick kid, and trouble following behind. Perfect. Just perfect. Every instinct screamed at him to put them on a horse and point them toward town in the morning, let them be someone else's problem. But then the boy, Eli, coughed. A wet, rattling sound that made Caleb's stomach tighten. The kid's hand reached out blindly, found Caleb's sleeve, and gripped it with surprising strength. "Don't go," Eli whispered. Caleb's throat went tight. He thought about another child, years ago. Different face, different name, the same desperate grip. "I'm not going anywhere," he heard himself say. Clara's eyes opened. She looked at him like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You can stay," Caleb continued, already regretting it, "until the kid's well. Then we'll figure out what comes next." "Thank you." Tears tracked down her dirty face. "Thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet." Caleb stood up, putting distance between himself and the emotion threatening to crack his careful control. "You'll work for room and board. I don't run a charity. And the minute your boy can travel, you're gone. Understood?" "Understood. There's a spare room upstairs, second door on the right. I'll bring up food and water. You eat, you rest. You don't cause trouble." "We won't. I promise." Caleb nodded curtly and headed for the door. "Mr. Mercer?" He paused, not turning around. "Why did you really help us?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. "Because somebody should have helped me once," he said finally, "and nobody did." Then he walked out, closing the door behind him, and tried to ignore the feeling that he'd just made the worst mistake of his life. 3 days passed. Eli's fever broke on the second night. Clara woke to find him sleeping peacefully, his skin cool to the touch, his breathing deep and steady. She'd cried then, really cried, for the first time since Thomas died. Relief poured out of her in great shaking sobs while she pressed her forehead to her son's small hand. Caleb had appeared in the doorway, drawn by the noise. He'd taken one look at her tear-stained face, and the sleeping boy nodded once and left without saying a word. Now, on the morning of the 4th day, Clara stood in Caleb Mercer's kitchen and tried to figure out how to repay a debt she could never fully settle. The kitchen was a disaster. Not dirty, exactly. Caleb was too disciplined for that. But stark. Functional. Joyless. The kind of space where a man ate to survive and nothing more. Canned beans lined the shelves. Dried meat hung in the pantry. There wasn't a fresh vegetable in sight. Clara rolled up her sleeves. She'd promised to work, and work she would. Besides, staying busy kept her from thinking about what would happen when Eli was fully recovered, and Caleb made good on his promise to send them away. She started with bread. Real bread, not the dense bricks cowboys usually made. She found flour, salt, yeast that was barely still good. Her hands moved through the familiar motions, kneading, shaping, setting the dough to rise. The simple act of creating something good felt like a rebellion against the last terrible month of her life. While the bread rose, she attacked the rest of the kitchen. She scrubbed counters, organized shelves, inventoried supplies. She found a few sad potatoes in the cellar and started a stew. Not fancy, but hot and filling. Caleb walked in around noon, stopped short when he saw her, and frowned. "What are you doing?" "Earning my keep." Clara didn't look up from the onion she was chopping. "You said I'd work for room and board." "I meant laundry, mending, not—" He gestured vaguely at the kitchen, which now smelled like rising bread and simmering stew. "I'm a better cook than I am a seamstress. I don't need— When's the last time you had a real meal?" Caleb's jaw worked. He didn't answer. "That's what I thought." Clara dumped the onions into the pot. "Dinner's at 6. Tell your men they're welcome." "My men eat in the bunkhouse." "Not tonight, they don't. I'm making enough for everyone." She finally looked at him directly. "Unless you'd rather I stop." It was a challenge, gentle but unmistakable. Caleb recognized it as such. For a moment, Clara thought he'd refuse just out of stubbornness. Then something in his expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but close. 6 o'clock, he said. "Don't make anything fancy." "Wouldn't dream of it." He left, shaking his head, and Clara allowed herself a small smile of victory. That evening, 5 ranch hands crowded into Caleb's dining room, a space that clearly hadn't been used for its intended purpose in years. Miguel, the foreman, looked uncomfortable in a clean shirt. The others kept glancing at Clara like she might disappear if they looked away. "Ma'am," one of them said awkwardly, "we appreciate—" "Sit." Clara set down a pot of stew that actually had vegetables in it. "And eat before it gets cold." The bread came next, golden and steaming. Then potatoes. Then the last of the preserved apples baked into something resembling a cobbler. Nobody spoke for the first 5 minutes. They just ate, eyes wide, like men who'd forgotten food could taste good. Caleb sat at the head of the table, his expression carefully neutral. But Clara noticed he went back for seconds, then thirds. Eli appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, his hair sticking up in every direction. "Mama? Come here, baby." Clara pulled him onto her lap. He was still weak, but the life had come back to his eyes. "Are you hungry?" He nodded. She fed him small bites of soft bread soaked in stew broth, and the room full of rough cowboys watched like they were witnessing something sacred. "How old are you, kid?" Miguel asked gently. Eli held up 4 fingers. 4. That's a good age." Miguel smiled. "You like horses?" Eli's eyes went wide. He nodded vigorously. "I'll show you the foals tomorrow, if your mama says okay." Eli looked up at Clara with such hope that her heart cracked a little. "We'll see," she said softly. "If you're feeling strong enough." Across the table, Caleb was watching them with an expression Clara couldn't quite read. Not angry, not warm either. Something complicated that made her think of deep water, still on the surface, but dangerous underneath. After dinner, the men thanked her with the awkward formality of people unused to kindness, then filtered back to the bunkhouse. Miguel lingered at the door. "Ma'am, that was the best meal I've had in 5 years. No offense to the boss." "None taken," Caleb said dryly from the kitchen. Miguel grinned and tipped his hat, then left. Clara started cleaning up, but Caleb stopped her. "Leave it. You've done enough." "I don't mind." "I said leave it." He wasn't harsh, just firm. "Get the kid to bed. You look dead on your feet." Clara wanted to argue, but he was right. The day had drained her. "Thank you." "For what?" "For letting us stay. For saving Eli's life. For—" She gestured helplessly. "Everything." Caleb's expression closed off. "Don't make it into something it's not. You needed help. I provided it, that's all." But it wasn't all, and they both knew it. Clara carried Eli upstairs, tucked him into the small bed in the spare room, and watched him sleep until her own eyes grew too heavy to keep open. Downstairs, Caleb sat alone at the dining table, surrounded by empty plates and the lingering smell of home cooking. He told himself it didn't mean anything. He told himself they'd be gone soon, and life would return to normal. He told himself he didn't already dread the silence that would follow. But lies, even the ones you told yourself, never tasted quite right. A week became 2. Eli grew stronger every day, his color returning, his energy boundless. He followed Caleb everywhere like a small, determined shadow. "What are you doing?" Eli asked for the 100th time, watching Caleb repair a fence post. "Fixing this before the cattle get out." "Why?" "Because fences keep things where they belong." "Why?" Caleb fought back a smile. "Because I said so." "Oh." Eli thought about this seriously. "Can I help?" "You're 4. I'm almost 5. Still 4. But I'm strong." Eli flexed his tiny arms. "See?" This time Caleb did smile, just a little. "All right, hand me that hammer." Eli carefully picked up the tool with both hands and carried it over like he was transporting explosives. "Here." "Good job." The kid beamed. They worked in comfortable silence, Caleb doing the actual repairs, Eli providing commentary and enthusiasm. The boy had no fear of hard work. Clara had raised him right in that regard. But more than that, he had a natural curiosity that reminded Caleb of someone else, someone he tried very hard not to think about. "Mr. Caleb?" "Just Caleb's fine." "Caleb." Eli tested the name. "Where's your family?" The question hit like a gut punch. Caleb's hand stilled on the fence post. "Don't have one." "Why not?" "They died." Eli absorbed this with the strange acceptance children had for terrible things. "Like my papa died?" "Yeah, like that." "I'm sorry." "Me too, kid." Eli was quiet for a moment, then reached out and patted Caleb's arm with one small hand. "It's okay to be sad." Caleb looked down at the boy, this tiny, earnest child who'd been through hell and somehow came out the other side still capable of compassion, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. "Yeah," he said roughly. "It is." That night, Clara found him sitting on the porch after dark, staring out at nothing. "Mind if I join you?" He shrugged. She sat down, leaving a careful foot of space between them. "Eli won't stop talking about you," she said. "Caleb this, Caleb that. You've made quite an impression." "He's a good kid." "He is." Pride warmed her voice. "He's been through so much, but he's still so—" She paused, searching for the word. "Good. You know?" "I know." They sat in silence for a while. Crickets sang in the grass. Stars blazed overhead in a way they never did back east. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said carefully. "You can ask. Doesn't mean I'll answer." "Fair enough." She took a breath. "What happened to your family?" Caleb's jaw tightened. He'd known this question was coming eventually, but that didn't make it easier. "Scarlet fever," he said finally. "My wife, Sarah. My daughter, Emma." She was 6. Clara's intake of breath was sharp. "Caleb, I'm so sorry. It was a long time ago." "That doesn't make it hurt less." "No, it didn't." "I was in Denver when it happened," Caleb continued, the words coming out flat and mechanical. "Business deal that couldn't wait. Or so I thought. By the time I got back, they were already—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I didn't get to say goodbye." Clara reached over and took his hand. Just that. No platitudes, no useless comfort, just the weight of her palm against his, warm and solid. "I told myself I'd never care about anyone again," Caleb said. "It's easier that way. Safer." "Is it?" He didn't answer. "I understand wanting to protect yourself," Clara said softly. "After Thomas died, I felt the same way. Like if I didn't let anyone close, I wouldn't have to survive losing them. But then I looked at Eli, and I realized—" She paused. "Love isn't safe. It's terrifying, but the alternative is just existing, not living. Existing's worked fine for me so far." "Has it?" Caleb turned to look at her then. Really look at her. In the moonlight, she was beautiful, not despite the hardship she'd endured, but because of it. Life had tried to break her, and she'd refused to stay broken. "You should go," he said, but there was no force behind it. "Why?" "Because you're making this complicated. Maybe it needs to be complicated." "Clara, we'll leave if you want us to. Say the word, and we'll be gone in the morning. But I think—" She hesitated. "I think maybe we all need each other more than we want to admit." Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to push her away, push them both away, go back to the safe numbness he'd built his life around. But her hand was still in his, and somewhere inside the house, Eli was sleeping peacefully in a bed Caleb had made sure was warm and safe. And for the first time in 6 years, this place felt less like a tomb and more like a home. "Stay," he said quietly. "Both of you, as long as you need." Clara's smile could have lit the whole prairie. "Thank you." But before either of them could say more, the sound of hoofbeats shattered the moment. They both stood, tense. Night visitors meant trouble. Always. 3 riders came into view, silhouetted against the moonlight. They stopped at the edge of the property, and one of them called out, "I'm looking for Clara Whitmore." Clara went rigid. "No." "You know them?" "It's Randall." Her voice shook. "Thomas's brother. He found us." Caleb's expression hardened. He stepped in front of Clara, his body a wall between her and the riders. "This is private property," he called out. "State your business or leave." The lead rider urged his horse forward. Even in the darkness, Caleb could make out expensive clothes, polished boots, city money trying to play frontier. "My business is with Mrs. Whitmore. I'm here to collect my nephew and see to his proper care. The boy's fine where he is." "With all respect, sir, that's not your decision to make. The child belongs with family." "I am his family," Clara said, stepping around Caleb despite his warning glare. "I'm his mother." "You're a widow with no means of support." Randall's voice was smooth, reasonable, poisonous. "Eli deserves better than dragging him through the wilderness like a vagrant." "We're not vagrants, aren't you? Living off the charity of strangers, no home, no prospects." Randall smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "Come now, Clara, be reasonable. The boy needs stability, education, a proper home. I can provide all that." "You can provide a cage," Clara shot back. "That's what you mean." "I mean to honor my brother's wishes." Thomas would have wanted Eli raised properly. Thomas wanted Eli raised by his mother. Thomas is dead. The words landed like stones. "And unless you can prove you're capable of caring for the boy, the law will side with me. You know it. I know it." Caleb stepped forward, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. The lady said no. That's the end of the conversation. Randall's gaze shifted to Caleb, assessing. "And who might you be?" "Someone who doesn't appreciate strangers making threats on my land." "No threats, Mr. Mercer." "Mr. Mercer, simply a family matter. One that doesn't concern you." "It concerns me now." The 2 men stared at each other, the air thick with unspoken violence. Finally, Randall smiled again, that same cold, calculated expression. "Very well. We'll settle this properly. Through the courts." He turned his horse. "Enjoy your temporary arrangement, Clara. It won't last long." Then he and his men disappeared into the darkness, leaving Clara shaking and Caleb furious. "He's going to take Eli," Clara whispered. "He has money, influence, lawyers. I have nothing." "You have me." She looked at him confused. "What?" Caleb's mind was racing, working through possibilities, angles, solutions. He'd spent 6 years avoiding complications. But now, standing here with Clara falling apart and that bastard Randall threatening to tear apart the closest thing to family Caleb had felt in years. Sometimes you had to fight. "Marry me," he said. Clara's eyes went wide. "What?" "Tomorrow, we get married, make it legal. Then you're not a vagrant widow. You're a rancher's wife with a home and means of support. Randall can't touch you." "That's insane. It's practical." Caleb kept his voice level, businesslike. "You need protection. I can provide it. In exchange, you keep doing what you're already doing. Cook, run the house, make this place less of a morgue. Everybody wins." "That's not a marriage. That's a transaction." "Exactly. No expectations, no complications, just an arrangement that solves both our problems." Clara stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. "This is crazy," she said finally. "Probably. It won't work. Might not. You're serious." "Dead serious." She looked back at the house, where Eli was sleeping, safe and warm and unaware that his entire future hung in the balance. Then she looked at Caleb, this hard, damaged man who'd saved them for no reason except that someone should have saved him once. "All right," she whispered. "All right?" "Yes, I'll marry you." Caleb nodded once, sharp and final, like he'd just signed a contract instead of proposing marriage. "Good. I'll ride to town in the morning and make the arrangements. He turned to go inside, but Clara caught his arm. Caleb, why are you really doing this? He looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then back at her face. Because that kid in there deserves better than what life's given him so far, he said quietly. And because watching you two leave would be... He stopped. Just get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Then he pulled away and disappeared into the house, leaving Clara alone under the stars, her heart pounding and her mind reeling. She'd agreed to marry a stranger, a frontier marriage of convenience, a business arrangement wrapped in wedding vows. It was insane. It was desperate. And as Clara looked out at the dark prairie where Randall had vanished, she knew with cold certainty that it was also their only chance. Tomorrow, they'd gamble everything on a lie, and if they lost, no, she couldn't think about that. Clara wrapped her arms around herself and walked back inside, where the warmth of the house wrapped around her like a promise neither of them was quite ready to keep. The morning came too fast and too bright. Clara woke to find Eli already awake, sitting at the window and watching the ranch hands move cattle across the distant fields. The sunlight caught his hair and made it glow copper, just like Thomas's had. Mama, are we staying forever? The question landed like a fist to her chest. Clara sat up, her body aching from a night spent barely sleeping, her mind spinning through every possible disaster that could come from what she'd agreed to. We're staying for a while, baby. Good. Eli pressed his palm against the glass. I like it here. Caleb's nice. And Miguel promised to show me the horses today. Did he now? Uh-huh. Can I go, please? Clara looked at her son, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't seen since before Thomas died. Hope. The kid actually looked happy. After breakfast, she said. And you stay close to Miguel. No wandering off. I won't! Eli scrambled down from the window seat and threw his arms around her neck. Thank you, Mama. She held him tight, breathing in the scent of his hair, and tried not to think about what she was about to do. What they were both about to do. Downstairs, Caleb was already dressed in what passed for his formal clothes. Clean denim pants, a pressed shirt that looked like it hadn't seen daylight in years, boots that were polished instead of dust-covered. He stood at the kitchen counter drinking coffee like he was preparing for surgery, not a wedding. You look terrified, Clara said. I'm not terrified. You're gripping that mug like it's trying to escape. Caleb glanced down at his white-knuckled hands and deliberately loosened his grip. Just thinking through logistics. Logistics, right. That's what every groom thinks about on his wedding day. This isn't a real wedding. I know that. It's a legal arrangement. I know. For practical purposes only. You've made that very clear. Clara poured herself coffee, her hands steadier than she felt. When do we leave? Within the hour. Judge Morrison handles civil ceremonies on Wednesdays. We'll need 2 witnesses. Miguel can be one. I'll ask Sam from the general store to be the other. You've thought this through. I told you. Logistics. Caleb drained his coffee and set the mug down with a sharp click. Clara, if you're having second thoughts, I'm not. Because once we do this, Randall's going to fight harder. He won't just roll over and accept it. I know. It could get ugly. Courts, lawyers, people talking. This town already has opinions about me. Adding you to the mix won't make it better. Clara met his eyes directly. I've survived worse than gossip, Caleb. And if marrying you means Eli stays safe, then I don't care what anyone says. Something flickered across his face. Respect, maybe, or recognition. All right then, get ready. We leave in 30 minutes. The ride to town felt surreal. Clara sat in the wagon beside Caleb, Eli wedged between them, chattering about horses and cattle, and whether Miguel would really let him help with the branding next month. Neither adult had the heart to tell him that next month was a fantasy, that this whole arrangement might collapse before the ink dried on the marriage certificate. The town of Benson Falls wasn't much. A main street lined with weather-beaten buildings, a church with a crooked steeple, a saloon that never closed, and enough mud to swallow a man whole if he wasn't careful. People stopped and stared as Caleb's wagon rolled past. He ignored them with the ease of long practice. They're staring, Clara muttered. They always stare. I'm the local ghost story. What? The hermit rancher who lost his family and went half crazy with grief makes for good gossip over Sunday dinner. Caleb's voice was flat. Let them look. They'll be talking about us plenty after today anyway. He pulled the wagon up in front of a small building with county clerk painted on the window. Inside, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and sharper opinions looked up from her ledger. Caleb Mercer. As I live and breathe, didn't think I'd see you in town again this year. Mrs. Patterson. Caleb removed his hat. We need to see Judge Morrison. Wedding or funeral? Wedding. Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows shot up so fast they nearly reached her hairline. Her gaze slid from Caleb to Clara to Eli, and Clara watched the woman's brain work through the mathematics of scandal. I see. And the bride would be? Clara Whitmore, soon to be Clara Mercer. How soon? Today. Now Mrs. Patterson looked downright gleeful. This was gossip gold, and they both knew it. Judge Morrison's in his office. I'll let him know you're here. Though I'll warn you, there's a waiting period. We'll pay the expedite fee. Of course you will. She stood, smoothing her skirts. Make yourselves comfortable. This shouldn't take long. She disappeared through a back door, and Clara heard muffled voices, then what sounded suspiciously like a delighted laugh. She's going to tell everyone, Clara said. Before we're even out the door, Caleb agreed. You sure about this? Too late to back out now. It's not. We could walk away right now, pretend this never happened. Caleb, Clara put her hand on his arm. I'm sure. Eli tugged on Caleb's sleeve. Are you and Mama getting married? The question hung in the air like smoke. Caleb looked down at the boy, then at Clara, then back at Eli. Yeah, kid, we are. Does that mean you'll be my papa? Caleb's face went carefully blank. It means I'll take care of you and your mama. That's what it means. Oh. Eli thought about this. That's okay. I'd like that. Before Caleb could respond, Judge Morrison appeared, a barrel-chested man with a beard that could house small animals and eyes that missed nothing. Caleb Mercer. Heard you were getting hitched. Took me a minute to believe it. Believe it? Morrison looked at Clara with open curiosity. And you are? Clara Whitmore? Recent widow, from what I hear. Yes. Got family? Just my son. Morrison's gaze shifted to Eli, then back to Caleb. This is sudden. Life on the frontier doesn't wait for long engagements, Caleb said evenly. No, I suppose it doesn't. Morrison stroked his beard. You two understand what you're getting into? Marriage is a legal contract, not something to enter into lightly. We understand, Clara said. And you're both of sound mind? Nobody forcing anyone into anything? Nobody's forcing anything, Caleb said. We're both here by choice. Morrison studied them for a long moment, and Clara had the uncomfortable feeling he could see straight through to all the cracks in their story. But finally, he nodded. All right, let's make this official. Mrs. Patterson, fetch Sam from the general store. We'll need witnesses. The ceremony took less than 10 minutes. Sam showed up, clearly confused but willing. Miguel arrived just as they started, dusty from the road, his expression carefully neutral. They all crowded into Morrison's small office while the judge pulled out a Bible he clearly didn't believe either Caleb or Clara cared about. Normally I'd do the full ceremony, Morrison said, but something tells me you two want this quick and legal, not sentimental. Quick and legal works, Caleb confirmed. Morrison sighed like he'd just watched romance die. Fine. Caleb Mercer, do you take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife to have and to hold from this day forward? I do. Clara Whitmore, do you take this man as your lawfully wedded husband to have and to hold from this day forward? Clara's throat went dry. This was it, the point of no return. She looked at Caleb, the stranger who'd saved her life, who was about to tie his name to hers for reasons she still didn't fully understand, and made a choice. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the Montana Territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. Caleb, you may kiss your bride. Caleb went very still. Clara's heart hammered. They hadn't discussed this part, hadn't even thought about it. And now Judge Morrison and Mrs. Patterson and Sam and Miguel were all watching, waiting, and if they didn't sell this, Caleb leaned in and pressed his lips to Clara's in a kiss that lasted exactly 2 seconds. Chaste, formal, meaningless. Except Clara's skin burned where his mouth had touched hers, and when he pulled away, She saw something flicker in his eyes that looked almost like panic. "Congratulations," Morrison said dryly. "You're married. Mrs. Patterson will file the paperwork. That'll be $15 for the license and ceremony." Caleb paid in cash without blinking. Outside in the harsh afternoon sun, Clara stared at the marriage certificate in her hands and tried to process that she was now Clara Mercer. That she'd just legally bound herself to a man she barely knew. That her whole life had changed in the span of a breath. "Mama, are we going home now?" Eli asked. "Home." The word hit her sideways. "Yeah, baby, we're going home." Miguel clapped Caleb on the shoulder. "Congratulations, boss. Didn't see this coming." "Neither did I," Caleb muttered. "She seems like a good woman." "She is. So are you going to tell me what this is really about, or are we pretending it's a love match?" Caleb shot him a look. "It's about keeping them safe. That's all you need to know." "If you say so," Miguel tipped his hat to Clara. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Mercer, such as it is." "Thank you, Miguel." He headed back to his horse, but not before Clara caught the knowing smile on his face. He'd figured it out. Of course he had. Miguel had been with Caleb long enough to know the man didn't do anything without a reason. The ride back to the ranch was quieter than the ride into town. Eli fell asleep against Clara's shoulder, exhausted from the excitement. Clara watched the prairie roll by and tried to figure out what happened next. "We should talk about rules," Caleb said suddenly. "Rules?" "For this arrangement. Boundaries. Expectations." "Right. Because nothing says romance like contractual obligations. This isn't about romance." "I know. I was joking." Caleb frowned like the concept of humor was foreign. "You'll keep your room. I'll keep mine. No one expects anything to change in that regard." "Understood. You run the house however you want. I won't interfere." "And in return?" "In return, when people ask questions, and they will, we present a united front. Married couple. Happy home. Randall can't touch us if we look solid." "What happens when he tries anyway?" "He will try. But now you're not a vagrant widow. You're a rancher's wife with means and stability. Courts favor that. Unless they decide the marriage is fraudulent." Caleb's jaw tightened. "That's why we make it look real. Convince everyone, including Randall, that this is legitimate." "How do we do that?" "We act like a married couple in public, attend town functions together, let people see us as a unit." He paused. "It'll require some physical proximity, hand-holding, standing close. Nothing dramatic, but enough to be convincing." Clara felt heat creep up her neck. "I can manage that." "Good." They fell silent again. The ranch appeared on the horizon, and Clara felt an unexpected rush of relief. The place had started to feel familiar, safe, like it could actually become what Caleb kept calling it, home. But when they pulled into the yard, 3 horses were tied to the fence, expensive horses with polished saddles. Caleb's expression went dark. "Stay in the wagon." "Who is it?" "Trouble." He helped Clara and Eli down, positioning himself between them and the house. The front door opened and Randall Whitmore stepped out onto the porch like he owned the place. "There you are," Randall said pleasantly. "I was beginning to think you'd run off." "This is private property," Caleb said. "You're trespassing." "Just waiting for my sister-in-law to return. We have business to discuss." "We have nothing to discuss," Clara said, her voice shaking slightly. "I told you last night." "Yes, you told me many things, but I've come with legal counsel to clarify the situation." Randall gestured and 2 men stepped out from behind him. One carried a leather folder stuffed with papers. The other had the cold eyes of someone paid to intimidate. "Mr. Whitmore has filed for emergency custody of Eli Whitmore," the lawyer said, his voice nasal and officious, "based on concerns about the child's welfare and living conditions." "You can't do that," Clara breathed. "I absolutely can, and unless you can prove you're capable of providing a stable home, the court will side with family." Randall's smile was sharp. "Blood is thicker than water, Clara. You know that." "She doesn't need to prove anything," Caleb said. "She has a stable home. Right here," Randall laughed. "Living off charity? That's not stable. That's desperate. Not charity. Marriage." The word dropped like a bomb. Randall's smile faltered. "What?" "We got married this morning. Judge Morrison presiding. Legal and binding." Caleb's voice was granite. Claire's not a vagrant widow anymore. She's my wife. This is her home. Our home. The lawyer looked at Randall, confused. Randall's face had gone red. You're lying. Check with the county clerk. The paperwork's already filed. Caleb pulled Clara closer, his arm sliding around her waist. She leaned into him, trying to look like a woman who'd married for love instead of survival. This is fraud, Randall sputtered. A marriage of convenience to avoid custody laws. It's a legal marriage, the lawyer interrupted quietly. If it's registered with the territory, there's nothing fraudulent about it, even if the timing is convenient. Randall wheeled on him. Then we challenge it, prove it's a sham. On what grounds? They're married, that's a fact. On the grounds that it happened overnight. No courtship, no engagement, just a desperate grab to keep the boy. Frontier marriages happen fast, Caleb said. Nothing unusual about it. You expect me to believe you fell in love with my dead brother's wife in a matter of weeks? I don't care what you believe. I care what the law says. And the law says Clara Mercer is my wife, Eli is under my protection, and you're trespassing on my land. Randall's face twisted with rage. For a moment, Clara thought he might actually throw a punch, but the lawyer put a restraining hand on his arm. Mr. Whitmore, perhaps we should regroup and reassess. This isn't over, Randall hissed. He jabbed a finger at Clara. You think you're clever, trapping another man to save your skin? Thomas would be ashamed. Thomas would be proud that I'm protecting our son, Clara shot back, finding her voice. Which is more than you're doing. You don't want Eli because you love him. You want him because he's worth money. How dare you? Shh. The inheritance, Thomas's share of the family business. It goes to Eli when he turns 18 with his guardian controlling it until then. That's what this is about. Randall's silence was confirmation enough. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Whitmore, we should go. Yes, you should, Caleb agreed. His hand moved to rest on his holstered gun. Not a threat, just a reminder. And don't come back unless you're invited. Randall stared at them both, his eyes burning with hatred. You haven't won, not by a long shot. I'll see you both in court, and when I'm done, you'll wish you'd handed the boy over peacefully. Get off my land. Randall turned and stalked toward his horse. The lawyer and the intimidator followed. They mounted up and rode out, kicking up dust, leaving a wake of tension behind them. Clara sagged against Caleb, her legs suddenly unreliable. He held her upright without comment. That went well, Miguel said from the barn doorway, where he'd apparently been watching the whole thing. Could have been worse, Caleb said. Could have been better. Boss, he's going to make trouble. I know. Real trouble, court kind of trouble. I know. Miguel looked at Clara. You holding up all right, Mrs. Mercer? The name still sounded foreign. I'm fine. You're shaking. I said I'm fine. Miguel raised his hands in surrender. All right, just checking. He headed back toward the barn, then paused. For what it's worth, that was the gutsiest thing I've seen in a while. Both of you. After he left, Caleb gently disentangled himself from Clara. You should sit down. I should check on Eli. She looked around wildly. Where's Eli? Right here, Mama. She spun to find him standing in the doorway, his face pale. How much did you hear? All of it. His voice was small. Uncle Randall wants to take me away. Clara's heart cracked. She knelt down and pulled him into her arms. That's not going to happen. He said, I don't care what he said. You're staying with me, with us. You understand? Eli nodded against her shoulder, but she could feel him trembling. Come on, Caleb said quietly. Let's go inside. All of us. They retreated into the house like soldiers regrouping after a battle. Caleb poured whiskey for himself and Clara, who drank it without tasting it. Eli curled up on the sofa, unusually quiet, his eyes too old for his face. What happens now? Clara asked. Randall files his custody petition. We respond through a lawyer. It goes to court. Do we have a lawyer? No, but I know one in Helena. Good man. Owes me a favor. What kind of favor? The kind that means he'll take the case. Caleb downed his whiskey in one swallow. But Clara, you need to understand, Randall has money and connections. This isn't going to be easy. I never thought it would be. He's going to dig into our lives, your past, my past. He'll twist everything to make us look unfit. Then we don't give him anything to twist. We're already giving him ammunition, a marriage that happened overnight between a widow and a recluse. It looks suspicious because it is suspicious. So we make it look real, Clara said. Like you said, united front, convincing performance, whatever it takes. Caleb studied her face. You're tougher than you look. I've had to be. Something passed between them then, understanding, maybe, or mutual respect. Two people who'd been broken by life and refused to stay down. All right, Caleb said. Then we do this properly. Starting tomorrow, we act like a married couple. Not just in public. Here too. Eli's smart. If he sees us acting like strangers, he'll know something's wrong. And if he knows, everyone will know. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we sell this, completely. Dinners together, conversations, small touches, casual affection. Nothing inappropriate, he added quickly. Just believable. Clara's pulse kicked up. And when this is over, when Randall's gone and the custody is settled, then we go back to the arrangement. Separate lives under one roof. Just like that. Just like that. It should have been simple, clean, logical. But Clara looked at this man she'd married, this stranger who'd become something else without either of them planning it, and wondered if going back would be as easy as he made it sound. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Miguel spread the word among the ranch hands about the marriage, and by dinner time they'd organized an impromptu celebration. Nothing fancy, just the men gathering in the main house with whatever liquor they could scrounge, toasting the newlyweds with varying degrees of sincerity and confusion. To the boss, one of them said, raising a tin cup. Finally getting some sense in his life. To Mrs. Mercer, another added. Brave enough to take him on. Clara smiled and played her part. She stood next to Caleb, let him keep his arm around her waist, laughed at the jokes even when they made her stomach twist. Caleb did the same, his performance flawless. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple who'd found each other against the odds. Only when everyone had finally cleared out and Eli was asleep upstairs did the mask come off. Clara stood at the kitchen sink, washing glasses, her body exhausted but her mind too wired to rest. She heard Caleb come up behind her but didn't turn around. You did good today, he said. So did you. This isn't what you signed up for, any of it. I signed up for survival. This is what it looks like. Caleb was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I meant what I said earlier. About Randall not touching you or Eli. I'll make sure of it. Why? Clara finally turned to face him. Why do you care so much? You could have sent us away that first night. You didn't owe us anything. Caleb's expression closed off, that familiar wall slamming down. I told you. You told me someone should have helped you once and nobody did. But that's not the whole truth, is it? It's enough truth. Caleb, leave it alone, Clara. His voice wasn't harsh, just tired. We've both had a long day. Get some rest. He walked away before she could push harder, disappearing into his study and closing the door with a soft click that felt final. Clara stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of a celebration for a marriage that wasn't real, and wondered what the hell she'd gotten herself into. Upstairs, she checked on Eli one more time. He was sprawled across the bed, dead to the world, his small face peaceful in sleep. She brushed the hair back from his forehead and felt the familiar ache of fierce, terrified love. We're going to be okay, she whispered. I promise. But promises, she was learning, were easier to make than keep. That night, Clara lay awake in her room, staring at the ceiling and listening to the house settle. Somewhere down the hall, Caleb was doing the same. Two people trapped in the same story, pretending at a life neither had asked for. And tomorrow, she knew, the real performance would begin. The lawyer arrived from Helena 3 days later, riding into the ranch like he owned bad news and wasn't afraid to deliver it. His name was Marcus Webb, and he looked exactly like what Caleb had promised, a man who'd seen every dirty trick the frontier legal system had to offer and learned to play the game better than anyone else. He was younger than Clara expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a mouth that seemed permanently set in a half-smile that could mean anything. He shook Caleb's hand with the easy familiarity of old friends, then turned to Clara. Mrs. Mercer, pleasure to meet you. Is it? Clara asked. Because you look like a man who just rode a long way to tell me my life's about to get worse. Webb's smile became genuine. I like her already. She's got spine. She'll need it, Caleb said. Come inside. We'll talk. They gathered around the kitchen table, Clara, Caleb, and Webb, while Eli played in the yard under Miguel's supervision. Webb spread papers across the scratched wood surface like a general planning a battle. All right, let's not waste time on pleasantries. Randall Whitmore filed his petition yesterday. Emergency custody based on allegations of negligence, unstable living conditions, and questionable moral character. Clara's hands clenched. Questionable moral character? His words, not mine. He's painting a picture of a desperate widow who latched onto the first man she could find to avoid losing her son. Claims the marriage is fraudulent, designed solely to circumvent custody laws. Can he prove that? Caleb asked. Can we prove it's not? Webb countered. That's the real question. How long have you two known each other? 3 weeks, Clara admitted. How long were you courting before the marriage? Silence. Webb sighed. That's what I thought. Look, I'm not here to judge. I don't care why you got married, but a judge will care. A jury will care. And Randall's lawyer, a snake named Pemberton, sharp as they come, will make damn sure everyone in that courtroom cares. So what do we do? Clara asked. We build a narrative. Not a lie, exactly. Just a version of the truth that works in our favor. Webb pulled out a notebook. Clara, tell me about your husband, Thomas. How'd you two meet? At a church social in Kansas. I was 18. He was charming, handsome, full of dreams about heading west. And the marriage was happy? Clara hesitated. It was fine. Fine doesn't win court cases. Was it happy? Most of the time. Thomas had a good heart, but he was restless, always chasing the next opportunity, the next dream. We moved 7 times in 6 years. What about his relationship with Randall? Terrible. They fought constantly about money, about the family business. Randall thought Thomas was throwing away his inheritance on pipe dreams. Thomas thought Randall was a greedy bastard who cared more about profit than people. Webb scribbled notes. Good. That gives us motive. Randall's not fighting for custody out of love. He's fighting for control of Eli's inheritance. We can work with that. He turned to Caleb. Now you. Why did you marry Clara? Caleb's jaw tightened. Because she needed help. Not good enough. Try again. Because the boy was sick and dying and I couldn't just... He stopped, frustration bleeding through. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me why a man who's lived alone for 6 years suddenly decided to take in a widow and her child. Because she needed help makes you sound like a charity case. We need something stronger. Caleb stood abruptly and walked to the window, his back rigid. Clara watched him struggle with whatever he was trying to keep buried. My daughter was 6 when she died, he said finally, his voice rough. Same age as Eli when Clara showed up. I looked at that kid burning up with fever and I saw... He stopped. Started again. I saw a second chance, to do something right, to save someone instead of failing them. The room went quiet. Webb's pen had stopped moving. That, he said softly, is what we lead with. Not convenience, not desperation. Connection. You saw something in that boy that reminded you of your own loss, and you couldn't walk away. Clara saw a man willing to fight for her son when the whole world had turned its back. It's not a romance for the ages, but it's real. And real plays better in court than perfect. Clara looked at Caleb's rigid shoulders and felt something shift in her chest. He'd given Webb the truth, more truth than he'd given her in 3 weeks. And it hurt him. She could see it in the set of his spine, the way his hands gripped the window frame. What about the timeline? She asked, pulling focus back to safer ground. The marriage happened so fast. Won't that hurt us? It would, if this were Boston or New York. But this is Montana. People get married fast out here because life's hard and short, and you take your chances when you get them. We'll play that angle. Frontier pragmatism. Nothing scandalous about 2 adults making a practical choice that benefits everyone involved. Except it does look scandalous, Clara said. You know it does. Sure, to people who don't understand how the frontier works. But Judge Morrison does. And unless Randall can prove actual fraud, not just suspicious timing, the marriage stands. Webb tapped his papers. The real fight isn't going to be about the marriage. It's going to be about fitness. Randall will argue that even if you're legally married, Caleb's an unstable recluse with a tragic past, And Clara's a woman of questionable judgment who's dragged her child through hell. That's not fair, Clara said hotly. Fair doesn't win cases. Strategy wins cases. So here's what we're going to do. First, we establish Caleb as a respected member of the community, not a recluse, a private man who's suffered loss and rebuilt his life into something productive and stable. We bring in character witnesses, ranch hands, business partners, people who can speak to his integrity. I don't have business partners, Caleb said. You have buyers for your cattle, suppliers, the bank that holds your mortgage, assuming you have one. Paid off 3 years ago. Perfect. Even better. A debt-free rancher with a successful operation. That's stability right there. Webb made another note. Second, we establish Clara as a devoted mother who made the best decision she could under impossible circumstances. We don't hide the fact that you were struggling. We frame it as strength. You protected your son, kept him alive through hardship, and when you found a good man willing to help, you had the courage to accept. Courage, Clara repeated. Is that what we're calling it? It's what the jury will call it if we present it right. And yes, there will be a jury. Custody cases this contentious always go to trial. Caleb turned from the window. When? 6 weeks, maybe 8. Pemberton will drag it out as long as possible, make you sweat. In the meantime, you two need to look like the most solid married couple in Montana. Go to town together, be seen, let people watch you build a life. The more normal you appear, the harder it becomes for Randall to claim this is a sham. We can do that, Clara said. Webb looked between them, his expression unreadable. Can you? Because I've seen this play before. Two people in a marriage of convenience, pretending it's something they don't feel. It falls apart under pressure. And Pemberton will apply pressure. He'll ask invasive questions. He'll make you uncomfortable. He'll try to catch you in contradictions. If there's any crack in your story, any hesitation, any moment where you two look at each other like strangers instead of spouses, he'll exploit it. We'll hold up, Caleb said. You better, because if you don't, that boy ends up with Randall, and everything you've done will be for nothing. After Webb left, promising to return in a week with a formal strategy, Clara found Caleb in the barn, working on a saddle that didn't need fixing. His hands moved with precise, angry efficiency. You didn't have to tell him about Emma, she said quietly. He needed something to work with. Still, that was personal. Everything's personal now. Caleb didn't look up. That's what this whole thing is. Our lives picked apart and put on display for strangers to judge. Clara leaned against a support beam. Are you sorry that you married me? I'm sorry it came to this, but no, not sorry. Even though it's going to get ugly? It was always going to get ugly. At least this way we're fighting back. She watched him work for a moment, this man who hid so much behind walls of silence and control. What you said about seeing Eli and thinking of your daughter, was that true? Or just what Webb wanted to hear? Caleb's hands stilled. It was true. I'm sorry for your loss. I should have said that before. You've had your own losses to deal with. Doesn't make yours matter less. He finally looked at her, and Clara saw something raw in his eyes. When Emma died, I told myself I'd never let anyone close again. Caring too much is what kills you. Not the fever or the sickness or the accidents. It's the caring that destroys you. Because when they're gone, there's nothing left. But you let us in anyway. I didn't let you in. You collapsed on my doorstep and I didn't have the strength to turn you away. He smiled, but it was broken around the edges. Guess I'm weaker than I thought. Or stronger. Maybe it takes more strength to risk caring again than it does to shut yourself off. That's supposed to make me feel better? I don't know. Does it? Caleb turned back to the saddle. Ask me after the trial. The next 2 weeks became a performance neither of them had rehearsed for, but both committed to completely. They went to town for supplies and walked down Main Street hand in hand, ignoring the stares and whispers. They attended a barn raising at a neighboring ranch, where Clara charmed the women with stories about fixing up Caleb's kitchen, while Caleb stood with the men and endured their ribbing about finally settling down. Never thought we'd see the day, one rancher said, grinning. Caleb Mercer, married. What's next? You joining the church choir? Don't push your luck, Caleb replied, but his arm stayed around Clara's waist, steady and possessive. At home, the performance continued. Dinners together at the table, the three of them like a real family. Clara would talk about her day, Caleb would grunt responses. Eli would chatter endlessly about the horses and cattle and everything Miguel was teaching him. To anyone watching, they were normal, domestic, real. But at night, they retreated to separate rooms, and the distance between them felt like a canyon. Clara tried not to think about the way Caleb's hand felt in hers, warm and rough and oddly comforting. Tried not to notice how his rare smiles, always aimed at Eli, made something in her chest ache. This was temporary. An arrangement. When the trial was over and Randall was gone, they'd go back to being strangers who shared a roof. She repeated that to herself every night. It never quite stuck. Eli, meanwhile, had no such reservations. He'd decided Caleb was his father in every way that mattered, blood be damned. He followed the man everywhere, mimicked his walk, tried to deepen his voice to match Caleb's gravelly tone. It would have been funny if it wasn't also heartbreaking. "Caleb, can I help with the branding tomorrow?" Eli asked one evening, his face hopeful. "You're too young. It's dangerous." "I'll be careful, I promise." "Still too young." But Miguel said, "Miguel's not your father. I am." The words came out automatically, and Caleb froze the second he said them. His eyes shot to Clara, something like panic flickering across his face. But Eli just beamed. "So I can help?" Caleb cleared his throat. "You can watch. From a safe distance, that's it." "Okay." Eli threw his arms around Caleb's waist and squeezed. "Thanks, Papa." Caleb's hand came up awkwardly to pat the boy's head, his expression a mix of terror and something softer. When Eli ran off to tell Miguel the good news, Caleb stayed frozen, staring at nothing. "He's getting attached," Clara said carefully. "I know. When this is over, I know." Caleb's voice was rough. "I'm not an idiot, Clara. I know what I'm setting him up for, what I'm setting us all up for. Then why let it happen? Because I don't know how to stop it." He looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her chest tight. "I thought I could keep this clinical, detached, but that kid, he's under my skin, and I don't know what the hell to do about it." Clara crossed to him and put her hand on his arm. "You love him." "I shouldn't, but you do." Caleb pulled away, his walls slamming back up. "Doesn't matter what I feel. After the trial, you'll both be safe. That's what matters. And then what? We just go back to pretending we're strangers?" That was the deal. Deals change, people change. Not me. I don't change. But even as he said it, Clara knew it was a lie. He'd already changed. They both had. The question was whether either of them had the courage to admit it. The town of Benson Falls had a peculiar tradition called the Harvest Social, a community gathering where everyone brought food, drank too much, and pretended they didn't hate half their neighbors. Caleb had avoided it for 6 years running, but when the invitation came, Webb's voice echoed in Clara's head. "Be seen, look normal, build the narrative." "We're going," she told Caleb. "Like hell we are." "We need to." Webb said, "I don't care what Webb said. I'm not parading us around like circus animals." "It's not a parade. It's a social gathering. Normal married couples attend social gatherings. We're not a normal married couple." "Then we fake it, like we've been faking everything else." Clara planted her hands on her hips. "Unless you want to hand Randall ammunition, because I guarantee he'll use our absence as proof we're hiding something." Caleb glared at her. She glared back. Finally, he muttered something profane and walked away. They went to the social. The community hall was packed with people who'd spent the last month gossiping about the scandalous marriage between the hermit rancher and the mysterious widow. The conversations didn't stop when Clara and Caleb walked in. They just got quieter, more pointed. Clara felt every eye on her as she carried her contribution, apple pie made from the half-wild apples she'd found on the property, to the dessert table. Behind her, Caleb moved like a man walking to his own execution, Eli glued to his side. "Mrs. Mercer," a woman with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands approached. "I'm Dorothy Henshaw. We haven't been properly introduced." "Pleasure to meet you." "That pie looks wonderful. Did you make it yourself?" "I did." "Well, we're lucky to have someone who can actually cook. Most of the men around here survive on beans and regret." Dorothy smiled. "How are you settling in? It must be quite an adjustment." "It's different from what I'm used to," Clara admitted. "But good. The ranch is beautiful." "And Caleb? How's married life treating him?" The question was pointed, polite but probing. Clara smiled. He's adjusting. We both are. I imagine it's not easy building a life from scratch like this, but you seem to be managing. We're making it work. More women filtered over, some friendly, some clearly fishing for gossip. Clara answered their questions with careful honesty, never giving them anything scandalous but never acting defensive either. Just a woman talking about her new life, her new husband, her son. Across the room, Caleb was enduring similar treatment from the men. Clara watched him field questions with monosyllabic answers and increasing irritation, Eli chattering happily at his side about horses and cattle and how Caleb had promised to teach him to rope. Then Randall walked in. The room didn't go silent, but it might as well have. Everyone knew about the custody fight. Small towns didn't keep secrets. Randall's eyes found Clara immediately, cold and calculating. He crossed the room with the confidence of a man who believed money could buy anything, including victory in court. Clara, what a surprise to see you here. Why wouldn't I be? This is my community now. Is it? How convenient that you've suddenly become a pillar of society. His gaze swept the room. I wonder how many of these fine people know the truth about your hasty marriage. Everyone knows we got married, Clara said evenly. There's nothing secretive about it. No, I suppose there isn't. You've been quite public with your arrangement. Randall's smile was poison. Tell me, how does Eli feel about having a replacement father so soon after losing Thomas? Clara's blood boiled, but before she could respond, Caleb was there, inserting himself between them like a wall. Eli's happy, Caleb said, his voice dangerously quiet, which is more than he'd be with you. You don't know anything about me. I know you're using a child as a pawn to get your hands on money that isn't yours. That tells me everything I need to know. People were watching now, not even pretending to look away. This was better than theater. Randall's expression hardened. Careful, Mercer. Slandering me in public won't help your case. Neither will harassing my wife at a community gathering. Your wife. Let's talk about that. How much did she pay you to marry her? Or was it the other way around? Did you see a desperate woman and decide to take advantage? Caleb's fist clenched. Clara grabbed his arm, her grip tight. Don't, she whispered. He's baiting you. It's working. I know, but we can't give him what he wants. Randall was watching them with satisfaction. Trouble in paradise already? That was quick. No trouble, Clara said loudly for the benefit of their audience. Just a difference of opinion about whether you deserve a punch in the mouth or just to be ignored. I'm voting for ignored. A few people laughed. Randall's face flushed red. Enjoy your little show, he said. But when we get to court, the truth will come out. And then everyone will see you for what you are, liars using a child for your own purposes. The only person using Eli is you, Clara shot back. And when the jury sees that, they'll laugh you out of the territory. Randall opened his mouth, but Judge Morrison appeared at his elbow. Gentlemen, ladies, this is a community gathering, not a courtroom. Let's keep things civil. Of course, Your Honor, Randall said smoothly. I was just leaving anyway. Some of us have work to do. He tipped his hat mockingly and walked out, leaving tension in his wake. The room slowly returned to normal conversation, but Clara felt shaky. Caleb's arm came around her waist, steadying her. You all right? I want to go home. We can't. Not yet. We leave now. It looks like we're running. I don't care how it looks. Yes, you do. Come on. We'll stay another hour, eat some terrible food, let people see us happy. Then we'll go. It was the longest hour of Clara's life, but they survived it, smiling and chatting and playing the part of a couple who couldn't be shaken. When they finally made it back to the ranch, Clara felt wrung out, exhausted down to her bones. Eli had fallen asleep in the wagon. Caleb carried him inside and up to bed while Clara stood in the kitchen, staring at nothing. You did good tonight, Caleb said when he came back down. I wanted to hit him. So did I. But we didn't. That's what counts. Caleb poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. To restraint. To surviving. Clara drank, felt the burn, welcomed it. This is going to get worse, isn't it? Probably. Are we going to make it? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, We have to. The subpoenas came a week later, requests for financial records, employment history, medical records for Eli. Randall's lawyer was building his case brick by brick, looking for any weakness to exploit. Webb returned with his own stack of papers and a battle plan that made Clara's head spin. Character witnesses, financial statements, testimony about Caleb's standing in the community. They were building a fortress of paperwork and respectability around Eli, hoping it would hold when Randall attacked. The trial's set for 3 weeks from now, Webb announced. Judge Morrison presiding, jury of 12. Pemberton's going for the throat. He's filed motions to introduce evidence of Caleb's reclusive behavior, Clara's financial struggles, even Thomas's death. He wants to paint a picture of instability and desperation. Can he do that? Clara asked. He can try. I'll object to what I can, but some of it will get through. The key is to own it before he can weaponize it. Yes, Caleb lived alone for years, because he was grieving. That's human, not unstable. Yes, Clara struggled after Thomas died, because she was protecting her son in impossible circumstances. That's strength, not weakness. You make it sound simple, Caleb said. It's not simple, it's strategy. And it only works if you two are rock solid on that stand. No hesitation, no contradictions, no moments of doubt. Clara and Caleb exchanged glances. We'll be ready, Clara said. Webb looked skeptical, but nodded. I hope so. Because Pemberton's going to try to break you. He'll ask about your relationship, your marriage, your feelings for each other. And if either of you flinches, if there's even a second of uncertainty, the jury will see it, and we'll lose. After Webb left, Clara found Caleb on the porch, staring out at the darkening prairie. What are you thinking? She asked. That I should have turned you away that first night, saved us both this mess. Clara sat down beside him. Do you really believe that? Some days. What about the other days? Caleb was quiet. Then so softly she almost missed it. The other days, I think maybe this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Clara's heart stuttered. Caleb, don't. Whatever you're about to say, don't. He stood abruptly. This is still an arrangement, Clara, still temporary. Don't forget that. He walked inside, leaving her alone with the stars and the wind and the uncomfortable truth that she'd already forgotten. Somewhere between the wedding and the performance and the slow, careful building of something that looked like a family, Clara had stopped pretending. She'd fallen for him. For this broken, difficult man who couldn't admit he cared. For the way he was with Eli, patient and gruff and secretly tender. For the rare moments when his guard dropped and she saw the person underneath the armor. And it was going to destroy her. Because when this was over, when Randall was gone and Eli was safe, Caleb would keep his word. He'd retreat back into his walls, and she'd be left pretending that 3 months of playing house hadn't changed everything. Inside, Caleb stood at his study window and watched Clara on the porch. Her shoulders were hunched against the cold. Her face turned up to the sky like she was looking for answers the stars couldn't give. He'd lied to her. Again. This wasn't temporary. It hadn't been temporary since the moment Eli grabbed his hand and called him Papa, since Clara smiled at him over dinner like he was someone worth smiling at, since he'd woken up one morning and realized the silence he'd cherished for 6 years now felt like a punishment. But admitting that meant risking everything. And Caleb had already lost everything once. He didn't have the courage to survive it again. So he'd lie. Keep lying. Right up until the moment it killed him. Outside, Clara stood and walked back inside, and Caleb retreated to his study before she could see him watching. 2 people circling each other in the dark, both terrified of the same thing. 3 weeks until trial, 3 weeks to hold it together, 3 weeks to pretend this marriage was real while desperately wishing it was. The clock was ticking. The courtroom in Helena smelled like old wood, stale cigars, and the sweat of 100 nervous people who'd passed through its doors looking for justice they might not find. Clara sat beside Webb at the defendant's table, though technically she wasn't a defendant, just a mother fighting to keep her child, and tried to remember how to breathe. Caleb sat on her other side, his face carved from stone. He'd worn his best suit, the one he'd probably bought for his first wedding and hadn't touched since Sarah died. It hung a little loose on him now, like he'd lost weight he couldn't afford to lose. His hand rested on the table between them, close enough to touch, but not touching. Across the aisle, Randall sat with his lawyer Pemberton, both of them looking like men who'd already won. Pemberton was everything Webb had promised, slick, expensive, and radiating the kind of confidence that came from years of crushing people in court and sleeping fine afterward. The gallery was packed. Half of Benson Falls had made the trip to watch the show. Clara recognized faces from the Harvest Social, from the general store, from church services she'd attended exactly twice to keep up appearances. They all watched her with varying degrees of sympathy and suspicion. Eli was back at the ranch with Miguel, thank heaven. Clara couldn't have survived watching him sit through this. All rise for the Honorable Judge Morrison. Everyone stood. Morrison entered in his black robes, looking about as happy to be there as Clara felt. He took a seat, surveyed the packed courtroom, and sighed. Let's get started. Mr. Pemberton, you're representing the petitioner? Yes, Your Honor. Randall Whitmore, uncle to the minor child Eli Whitmore, seeking custody based on concerns about the child's current living situation and welfare. And Mr. Webb, you're representing the respondents? Clara Mercer and Caleb Mercer, Your Honor. Mrs. Mercer is Eli's biological mother and current legal guardian. Very well. Mr. Pemberton, you may present your opening statement. Pemberton rose smoothly, buttoning his jacket. He had the kind of face that looked trustworthy until you looked closer and saw the calculation behind his eyes. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about a child, a 4-year-old boy named Eli, who has already suffered more loss than any child should, the death of his father, the instability of a mother who dragged him across the frontier without means or destination, and now the uncertainty of being placed in a household built on deception. Webb half rose. Objection, Your Honor. Inflammatory language. Sustained. Mr. Pemberton, stick to facts. Of course, Your Honor. Pemberton didn't look bothered. The facts are these. Clara Whitmore's husband died 6 weeks ago. Within days, she was on the road with no money, no plan, and a sick child. She was rejected by multiple towns before collapsing on the property of Caleb Mercer, a recluse rancher who hasn't allowed anyone close in 6 years. And then, conveniently, suspiciously, they married within 3 weeks of meeting. A marriage that coincidentally prevents the child's blood relatives from providing a stable, loving home. He paused, letting that sink in. We will prove that this marriage is a sham, a legal maneuver designed solely to circumvent custody laws. We will show that Mrs. Whitmore is desperate, that Mr. Mercer is emotionally unstable, and that Eli deserves better than being a pawn in their game. My client, Randall Whitmore, is offering that better life. Stability, education, a real family. Thank you. Pemberton sat down. Clara's hands were shaking. Webb patted her arm once, then stood. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, my learned colleague just told you a story. Now let me tell you the truth. Webb's voice was different in court. Bigger, more commanding. Yes, Clara's husband died. Yes, she struggled, because that's what happens when you lose everything and the world turns its back on you. But instead of giving up, instead of abandoning her son, Clara fought. She kept Eli alive through sickness and starvation and rejection. And when she finally found someone willing to help, a good man who saw a child in need and couldn't walk away, she had the courage to accept that help. He walked closer to the jury box. Caleb Mercer is not unstable. He's a man who suffered unimaginable loss and rebuilt his life into something solid. He owns a successful ranch, debt-free. He's respected in his community. And yes, he was cautious about letting people close, because he'd already lost his wife and daughter to scarlet fever. But when Clara and Eli needed him, he didn't hesitate. Webb's voice softened. This isn't a marriage of convenience. It's a marriage of survival that became something more. 2 broken people who found each other and decided to build a family. Is it unconventional? Sure. This is the frontier. Everything's unconventional, but it's real, and it's working. Eli is thriving. He's healthy, happy, and loved. The question isn't whether this marriage happened fast. The question is whether Eli is better off with his mother and the man who chose to be his father, or with an uncle who didn't bother visiting until there was money on the table. Clara saw Randall's jaw tighten. Direct hit. We will prove, Webb continued, that Eli is exactly where he belongs. Thank you. The first witness Pemberton called was a doctor from one of the towns Clara had passed through, a pinch-faced man named Dr. Hollis, who looked like he enjoyed being right more than he enjoyed helping people. Dr. Hollis, did you examine Eli Whitmore in late August? Briefly, the mother brought him to my office claiming he was sick. And what was your assessment? The boy had a fever and appeared malnourished. I recommended hospitalization, but Mrs. Whitmore refused. Clara's stomach dropped. That wasn't how it happened. Did she say why she refused? She claimed she couldn't afford it. Then she left before I could insist. So to be clear, you recommended medical treatment for a seriously ill child, and the mother refused and fled town. Objection, Webb said sharply. Mischaracterizes the testimony. Sustained, rephrase, Mr. Pemberton. Dr. Hollis, in your medical opinion, did Mrs. Whitmore's refusal to hospitalize Eli put his life at risk? Yes. The boy could have died without proper treatment. Clara wanted to scream. She'd begged Hollis to help, offered to work off the debt, anything. He'd quoted her a price she couldn't pay and then told her to leave. But now he sat there making her sound negligent. Webb cross-examined hard. Dr. Hollis, how much would hospitalization have cost? I don't recall exactly. Ballpark. Perhaps $30. Did Mrs. Whitmore offer to work off that debt? Hollis shifted. She may have mentioned something like that. And did you accept? We don't operate on credit. So a woman with a dying child willing to work for payment, and you turned her away? I run a business, not a charity. Clearly, Webb's voice dripped contempt. No further questions. The afternoon brought more witnesses. A shopkeeper who'd caught Clara stealing bread, which she had done because Eli was starving, but hearing it described in court made her sound like a criminal. A hotel owner who testified that Clara had tried to rent a room without money and became aggressive when refused. Aggressive meaning she'd cried and begged. Each testimony chipped away at her. By the time court adjourned for the day, Clara felt raw, exposed. They made her sound incompetent at best, dangerous at worst. Outside the courthouse, she leaned against the wall and tried not to fall apart. That was brutal, she said. That was Pemberton doing his job, Webb replied. Making you look bad before we have a chance to make you look good. Don't worry, tomorrow we start presenting our case. Will it be enough? It has to be. Caleb appeared with the wagon. They rode back to the boarding house in silence. They'd rented rooms for the duration of the trial, separate rooms because even now they maintained the fiction of propriety. Clara wanted to laugh at the absurdity. They were married, legally bound, but still sleeping in separate beds because actually consummating this arrangement would make it too real. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She stood at her window and watched the street below, her mind replaying every damning testimony. Around midnight, she heard a soft knock. It's me, Caleb's voice came through the door. She opened it. He stood there in his shirt sleeves, looking as wrecked as she felt. Can't sleep either? She asked. Keep thinking about tomorrow, about having to take the stand and convince 12 strangers that we're... He stopped. That we're what? Real, he finished quietly. That this isn't just a legal trick. Clara stepped back, letting him in. He hesitated, then entered, leaving the door open for propriety's sake, even though propriety seemed laughable at this point. Are you scared? She asked. Terrified. The admission surprised her. Caleb never admitted weakness. Of losing Eli, of losing everything. He ran his hand through his hair. I told myself I could do this. Keep it clinical, detached. But Clara, that kid, when I think about Randall taking him, raising him, I can't... His voice cracked. I can't lose another child. Clara crossed to him and took his hand. You won't. We won't let that happen. You don't know that. Pemberton's good. He's making us look like frauds. Because he's scared. If this marriage was obviously fake, he wouldn't be fighting so hard. The fact that he's bringing in witnesses and building this whole case means he knows we're legitimate. Are we? Caleb looked at her directly. Are we legitimate, Clara? Or are we just two people pretending so hard we've convinced ourselves? The question hung between them, dangerous and necessary. I don't know, Clara whispered. I don't know what this is anymore. Neither do I. They stood there, hands clasped, both afraid to move closer and afraid to pull away. Finally, Caleb squeezed her fingers once and stepped back. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be harder. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Clara stood alone in the dim room and wondered if she'd just lied, because she did know what this was, at least for her. She'd stopped pretending weeks ago. The second day of trial brought Webb's witnesses. Miguel took the stand first, solid and unshakable. How long have you worked for Mr. Mercer? Webb asked. 8 years. And in that time, would you describe him as unstable or reclusive? He's private. That's different. Caleb's one of the best men I know. Fair, hardworking, honest. Has his behavior changed since Mrs. Mercer and Eli arrived? Miguel smiled slightly. Yeah, he smiles now, talks more. The place feels alive again. And in your observation, how does he treat Eli? Like his own son, patient, kind. He's teaching him to rope, to ride, spends time with him every day. That boy worships him. Pemberton's cross was brutal. Mr. Rodriguez, you're employed by Mr. Mercer, correct? Yes. So you have a financial interest in making him look good? I have an interest in telling the truth. The truth being that your boss suddenly married a stranger and you want to keep your job? Objection, Webb barked. Sustained. But the damage was done. The jury heard it. More witnesses followed. The banker testified to Caleb's financial stability. Dorothy Henshaw spoke about Clara's integration into the community. A cattle buyer praised Caleb's reputation. Each one added another layer to the defense. Then Webb called Caleb to the stand. Clara watched him walk to the witness box, sworn in, take his seat. He looked uncomfortable, trapped. Caleb hated being the center of attention, and now he had a courtroom full of people dissecting his every word. Webb started gentle. Mr. Mercer, tell us about the day Clara and Eli arrived at your ranch. Caleb's voice was rough. I was checking equipment when the dog started barking. Found a woman collapsed on my porch with a sick kid in her arms. They were half dead. What did you do? Brought them inside, got the boys' fever down. Let them rest. Did you know who they were? Not at first. Clara told me later. Widow, running from trouble, trying to survive. Why did you help them? Caleb was quiet for a moment. Because nobody helped me when I needed it. And because that boy deserved better than dying on a stranger's porch. When did you decide to marry Clara? When Randall showed up threatening to take Eli through the courts. She needed protection. I could provide it. So it was purely practical? Another pause. Longer this time. Clara held her breath. It started that way, Caleb said carefully. But things change. How so? Clara made my house a home again. Eli, he reminds me what it feels like to be a father, to have a family. I didn't think I'd ever have that again. Do you love them? The courtroom went silent. Clara's heart hammered. Caleb looked directly at her. Yes. Even though the marriage happened quickly? Especially because it happened quickly. Life's too short to waste time. Webb nodded. No further questions. Pemberton stood, circling like a shark. Mr. Mercer, you said you love Clara and Eli? Yes. But you've known them for, 2 months? About that. And you expect this jury to believe you fell in love with a complete stranger in 2 months? I don't care what the jury believes. I know what I feel. Convenient timing, though. Right when a custody battle makes such feelings legally beneficial. Objection, Webb said. Argumentative. Sustained. Pemberton changed tactics. Mr. Mercer, you lost your first wife and daughter to scarlet fever, correct? Caleb's face went hard. Yes, that must have been devastating. It was. And afterward, you isolated yourself, lived alone, avoided people. I was grieving for 6 years? Grief doesn't have a deadline. No, but it does affect judgment. Tell me, when you saw Eli sick with fever, did it remind you of your daughter? Caleb's jaw clenched. Yes. So you weren't seeing Eli as himself. You were seeing a replacement for Emma. That's not... You wanted to save this child because you couldn't save your own. Isn't that the truth? I wanted to help a sick kid. That's the truth. And marrying his mother was part of that help? Or was it something else? Loneliness, perhaps? Desperation for a family to fill the void? Objection! Webb was on his feet. Your Honor, counsel is badgering the witness. Mr. Pemberton, move along, Morrison said. But Pemberton had made his point. The jury was looking at Caleb with pity and doubt. A lonely widower trying to recreate what he'd lost. Not a man genuinely building a new family. When Caleb stepped down, he looked beaten. Clara wanted to reach for him, but they were in public, being watched. She settled for a small nod. He nodded back. Then it was her turn. Walking to the witness stand felt like walking to the gallows. Clara swore on the Bible, sat down, and forced herself to meet Webb's eyes. "Mrs. Mercer, tell us about your husband, Thomas." "He was a good man, optimistic, ambitious, sometimes too ambitious, but he loved Eli and me." "And when he died?" "I was devastated, lost. We were in the middle of nowhere with no money and no plan. Thomas had always handled everything. Suddenly, I had to figure it out alone." "Why didn't you go to Randall for help?" "Because Thomas warned me not to. He and Randall fought constantly about money. Thomas said if anything happened to him, I should keep Eli away from Randall, that his brother only cared about the family business and the inheritance." "Did you try to find work?" "Everywhere. But nobody wants to hire a widow with a child. We were seen as a burden." "What happened when Eli got sick?" Clara's throat tightened. "He developed a fever outside of Tulsa. I tried to get help, but the doctor wanted money I didn't have, so we kept moving. I thought if I could just get to the next town, find someone who'd give us a chance." She stopped, swallowed hard. "By the time we reached Caleb's ranch, I was out of options. Eli was dying. I was barely standing." "Why did you agree to marry Caleb?" "Because Randall was going to take my son, and because Caleb offered me something nobody else had, a real chance. Not charity, partnership." "Do you love him?" The question she'd been dreading. Clara looked at Caleb sitting at the defense table, his eyes locked on hers. "Yes," she said. "I didn't expect to. But yes. He saved our lives, and then he gave us a home, a real home. How could I not love him?" Webb smiled. "Thank you, Clara. No further questions." Pemberton approached slowly. "Mrs. Mercer, you testified that Thomas warned you about Randall. Why?" "Because they didn't get along." "But specifically, what did Thomas say?" Clara hesitated. "That Randall was greedy, that he'd use Eli to get control of the inheritance." "Did Thomas provide proof of this?" "He didn't need to. I saw how they fought." "So this is your interpretation of their relationship, not fact." "It's what I observed. What you observed, or what you chose to believe in order to justify keeping Eli from his uncle." Pemberton's voice sharpened. "Tell me, Mrs. Mercer, how long after Thomas died before you met Caleb?" "About 3 weeks." "And how long before you married him?" 3 weeks after that. So 6 weeks after losing your husband, you married someone else. That seems fast. Life on the frontier moves fast. Or perhaps you were desperate, looking for any man who could provide what you needed. "I was looking for someone who'd help me protect my son." "By marrying you? That's quite a sacrifice for a stranger to make, unless he was getting something out of it too." Clara's temper flared. "What are you implying?" "I'm implying that this marriage is transactional. You needed protection. Mr. Mercer needed, what, company? A replacement family? Whatever the reason, you both entered into an arrangement that conveniently prevents a legitimate custody claim. There's nothing convenient about fighting to keep my child." "No, but there is something convenient about finding a wealthy rancher willing to marry you within weeks of meeting. Some might call that opportunistic. Some might call it survival. And some might call it fraud." Pemberton smiled coldly. "No further questions." Clara stepped down shaking. Webb caught her arm, steadying her. "You did fine," he whispered. "I didn't. I lost my temper. The jury saw a mother fighting for her child. That's not a bad thing." The rest of the day brought closing witnesses, procedural arguments, endless legal maneuvering. By the time Morrison adjourned for the day, Clara felt wrung out. Back at the boarding house, she and Caleb sat in the common room, too exhausted to speak. Finally, Caleb said, "Did you mean it?" "Mean what?" "What you said on the stand, about loving me." Clara looked at him, this broken, difficult man who'd become the center of her world without her permission. "Yes." "Did you mean what you said?" "Yes." They stared at each other, the truth finally spoken aloud, and neither knew what to do with it. "What happens if we lose?" Clara asked. "We won't." "But if we do, then we fight, we appeal, we run if we have to, but Randall doesn't get Eli. I don't care what it takes." "Caleb, we can't run." "That would make everything Pemberton said true." "I don't care, I'm not losing that kid." Clara reached for his hand. He gripped it hard. "We're not going to lose," she said, trying to believe it. The next morning brought closing arguments. Pemberton painted them as desperate frauds. Webb painted them as a family fighting for survival. The jury listened with unreadable faces. Then came the wait. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. 3 hours of sitting in the courtroom, watching the clock, feeling Clara's heart try to beat its way out of her chest. Caleb sat motionless beside her, his hand in hers, both of them holding on like drowning people. Finally, the jury returned. "Have you reached a verdict?" Morrison asked. "We have, Your Honor." "In the matter of custody of Eli Whitmore, how do you find?" The foreman stood. Clara stopped breathing. "We find that the child should remain in the custody of Clara Mercer." The courtroom erupted. Clara heard the words but couldn't process them. Caleb's hand tightened on hers. Webb was saying something, smiling. Randall was on his feet, furious, arguing with Pemberton. "Furthermore," Morrison said loudly, cutting through the noise, "this court finds that the marriage between Clara and Caleb Mercer is legitimate and binding. The petition for custody is denied. Mrs. Mercer retains full parental rights. This court is adjourned." His gavel cracked like thunder. Clara turned to Caleb and saw tears on his face. Actual tears. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him and held on. He held her back, his face buried in her hair. "We won," she whispered. "We actually won." "Yeah," his voice cracked. "We did." Across the aisle, Randall shoved past Pemberton and stormed out, his face purple with rage. Clara didn't care. Let him be angry. Eli was safe. That was all that mattered. But as the courtroom cleared and reality sank in, Clara realized something else. The trial was over. The threat was gone. And according to their original arrangement, that meant the marriage could end. They could go back to being strangers sharing a house. Except they weren't strangers anymore. And Clara didn't want to go back. She looked at Caleb and saw the same realization dawning on his face. Now what? The ride back to the ranch took 6 hours, and for the first 4, nobody spoke. Clara sat between Caleb and Webb in the wagon, exhaustion settling into her bones like winter cold. Victory should have felt different, lighter, easier. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing you had to jump but unsure what waited at the bottom. Webb broke the silence first. "You two look like you just lost instead of won." "We're tired," Clara said. "You're terrified," Webb corrected. "I've seen enough clients after trial to know the difference. What's wrong?" Caleb kept his eyes on the road. "Nothing's wrong. We won. Eli's safe. That's what matters." "Okay." "Sure. And now you have to figure out what happens next." Webb pulled out his pipe, packed it methodically. "The marriage served its purpose. Randall's custody claim is dead. You could petition for annulment if you wanted. Irreconcilable differences, marriage of convenience, any number of grounds." Clara's stomach dropped. "Is that what you think we should do?" "I think what you should do is none of my business. I'm just laying out options." He lit the pipe, puffed. "But for what it's worth, I sat through 3 days of testimony. Heard you both swear under oath that you love each other. Either you're the best liars I've ever met, or you actually meant it. And I've met a lot of liars." Neither of them responded. Webb shook his head, smiling slightly. "Suit yourselves, but you might want to figure it out before you get home and that boy asks questions you can't answer." He was right. Eli would see through any deception in seconds. Kids always did. They dropped Webb at the Benson Falls Junction, where he'd catch the stage back to Helena. He shook hands with both of them, his grip firm and knowing. "Good luck," he said. "You're going to need it." Then it was just the two of them. The wagon rattling over familiar roads, the ranch growing closer with every mile. Clara's heart hammered harder the nearer they got. She needed to say something, ask the question that had been burning in her chest since the verdict. But fear kept her silent. Finally, Caleb spoke. "We should talk about this." "About what?" "Don't play stupid, Clara. You know what." "The marriage." "Yeah, the marriage." He pulled the wagon to a stop in the middle of the empty road, turned to face her. "Webb was right. We have options. We could end this now, go our separate ways. You and Eli could stay at the ranch if you wanted. I wouldn't throw you out. Or I could help you get set up somewhere else. Whatever you need." Clara's throat closed. "Is that what you want?" "I'm asking what you want." That's not an answer. Caleb's jaw clenched. I don't know what I want. That's the problem. 6 months ago, my life made sense. I knew who I was, what I was doing. Then you showed up and everything got complicated. I didn't mean to complicate your life. I know, but you did. He looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes nearly broke her. I told myself this was temporary, that I could keep my distance, help you win custody, and then go back to being alone. But I can't. Every time I think about you leaving, taking Eli with you, He stopped, struggling. I can't do it. Then don't, Clara whispered. Don't make me leave. But staying means this becomes real, not a legal arrangement, a real marriage. Are you ready for that? Are you? I asked first. Clara laughed, but it came out shaky. You're impossible. You know that? So I've been told. She took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. I don't want to leave, Caleb. I don't want this to end. I love you. I meant what I said in court. And if you're asking me to stay, really stay, then my answer is yes. Something in his expression cracked open. Relief, hope, fear all tangled together. I'm not good at this. At being a husband, a father, I failed at it once already. You didn't fail. You lost them. That's different. Doesn't feel different. I know. But Caleb, listen to me. She held his gaze. I'm not Sarah. Eli's not Emma. We're not replacements for what you lost. We're something new. And maybe that's scarier because it means risking your heart again. But I'm willing to risk mine if you are. Caleb pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. I'm scared out of my mind. Good. So am I. That's supposed to make me feel better? Means we're both stupid enough to try anyway. He kissed her then, and it wasn't like the chaste peck at their wedding. This was real, desperate and messy, and full of all the things they'd been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb's smile was crooked. Guess we're doing this for real. Guess so. He picked up the reins, and they continued home. But this time Clara sat pressed against his side, his arm around her shoulders, and the weight of uncertainty had lifted just enough to breathe. The ranch appeared on the horizon just as sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Miguel must have been watching for them because he emerged from the barn before they'd even stopped the wagon, Eli running ahead of him. Mama! Caleb! Eli launched himself at them before Clara could even step down. She caught him, nearly falling, laughing as he squeezed her neck hard enough to cut off air. Did you win? Miguel said you'd win, but I was scared and… We won, baby. We won. Eli pulled back, his eyes bright. So I get to stay? Forever? Clara looked at Caleb, who was watching them with an expression that made her heart ache in the best way. Yeah, Caleb said, ruffling Eli's hair. You get to stay. Forever. And you're really my papa now, not just pretend? The question hit Caleb visibly. He crouched down to Eli's level, serious. I'm really your papa, if you want me to be. I want, Eli said immediately. Then he threw his arms around Caleb's neck with the unconscious trust only children possessed. I wanted you to be my papa the whole time. Caleb's arms came up, holding the boy tight, and Clara saw tears on his face again. 2 times in one day. She was keeping count. Miguel cleared his throat. Welcome home, boss, Mrs. Mercer. Good to have you back. Good to be back, Clara said. That night after Eli was asleep and the ranch had settled into quiet, Clara stood in the doorway of her room, the room she'd been sleeping in for 3 months, and looked down the hall at Caleb's closed door. According to their arrangement, she'd sleep here. He'd sleep there. Separate lives under one roof. But the arrangement was over. She walked to his door and knocked softly. It's open. Caleb sat on the edge of his bed, still dressed, looking like a man trying to figure out how to navigate unfamiliar territory. He looked up when she entered. You lost? He asked. No, just, we said we were doing this for real, right? Right. So maybe we should stop sleeping in separate rooms like we're strangers. Caleb's throat worked. Clara, if you're not ready, I'm ready. Are you? He stood, crossed to her slowly. I'm terrified. But yeah, I'm ready. She took his hand and he led her further into the room, closing the door behind them. What happened next wasn't smooth or perfect. There was nervousness, awkward moments, whispered reassurances. but it was real. And when Clara woke up the next morning in Caleb's arms, sunlight streaming through the window, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Home. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Real marriages never were. Caleb still struggled with opening up, with trusting that good things wouldn't be ripped away. Clara still had nightmares about Randall showing up to take Eli, even though legally he couldn't. They fought about stupid things, how to discipline Eli, whether to expand the ranch, who left the gate open and let 3 cattle escape. But they also laughed. Caleb taught Eli to rope, and the kid managed to lasso a fence post, a confused chicken, and Miguel's hat before finally getting the technique right. Clara turned the neglected garden into something productive, growing vegetables that actually tasted like food instead of punishment. At night they sat on the porch together, Eli between them, and watched the stars come out over the prairie. One evening, about 6 weeks after the trial, a visitor arrived. Clara was kneading bread when she heard horses. Her heart jumped. Randall, her mind supplied automatically, but when she looked out the window, she saw an older woman dismounting from a well-kept mare. Caleb came in from the barn, stopped short when he saw the visitor. Emma. The woman turned, and Clara saw the family resemblance immediately. Same sharp eyes, same set to the jaw. This was Randall's mother, Thomas's mother, Eli's grandmother. Caleb, the woman said, I hope I'm not intruding. Depends on why you're here. To apologize, and to meet my grandson properly. Emma Whitmore looked past Caleb to where Clara stood frozen in the doorway. And to speak with Clara, if she'll allow it. Clara's first instinct was to refuse. This woman was Randall's mother. She'd raised him, presumably agreed with him. But something in Emma's face, weariness, regret, made Clara hesitate. Come inside, she said finally. They sat in the parlor, tension thick enough to choke on. Emma accepted coffee, sipped it, then set down the cup with careful precision. I need you to understand something, she began. I didn't know the full extent of what Randall was doing until the trial. He told me he was concerned about Eli's welfare, that you were struggling, Clara, and needed help. I believed him because... She paused, struggling. Because I wanted to believe my son was capable of compassion. But he wasn't, Clara said flatly. No. He was after the money. Thomas's share of the family business, which transfers to Eli's guardian. I didn't realize until I started asking questions, looking at Randall's finances. He has substantial gambling debts, debts that would be solved if he controlled Eli's inheritance until the boy turned 18. Why tell us this now? Caleb asked. The trial's over. We won. Because Randall won't stop. He's angry, humiliated. Men like him don't accept defeat gracefully. Emma looked at Clara directly. I came to warn you and to offer whatever protection I can provide. Legally, financially. I may not be able to control my son, but I can make it very difficult for him to cause trouble. Clara's throat tightened. Why would you help us? We're strangers. You're not strangers. You're Eli's mother. And you... She turned to Caleb. You're the man who chose to be his father when his own blood relatives failed him. That matters. What about Randall? He's your son. He is, and I love him. But love doesn't mean enabling destruction. Emma's voice cracked slightly. I failed Thomas by not standing up to Randall sooner. They fought constantly, and I told myself it was just sibling rivalry. But it was more. Randall always resented Thomas for being the favorite, for having a family while Randall chased money. And now he's trying to take the one thing Thomas left behind. I won't let that happen. Clara felt tears burning. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just let me be part of Eli's life. Let me be the grandmother I should have been all along. Before Clara could respond, Eli appeared in the doorway, curious about the visitor. Emma's breath caught when she saw him. You look just like Thomas, she whispered. Eli tilted his head. Who's Thomas? Your papa, Clara said gently. Your first papa. This is his mama, your grandmother. Eli studied Emma with the frank assessment of childhood. I have a grandmother? You do. If you'll have me. Do you know stories about my papa, the one who died? Emma smiled through tears. I know hundreds of stories. Can you tell me? I'd like nothing better. Watching Eli climb onto Emma's lap and listen raptly to stories about Thomas, Clara felt something loosen in her chest. She'd spent so long running from the past, terrified of what it might take from her. But here was the past offering connection instead of pain, family instead of threat. Caleb's hand found hers under the table, squeezed gently. She squeezed back. Emma became a regular visitor after that, riding out to the ranch every few weeks to spend time with Eli and bring news of the outside world. She also proved true to her word about protecting them. When Randall tried to file an appeal, Emma's lawyers shut it down. When he attempted to contest Thomas's will, Emma produced documents proving the inheritance was ironclad. Slowly, Randall's options dwindled until he had none left. 6 months after the trial, word reached the ranch that Randall had left Montana entirely, chased out by debts and shame. Clara felt only relief. The threat was truly over. Life settled into rhythms that felt almost normal. The ranch prospered. Caleb hired 2 more hands and bought additional land. Clara's garden expanded into something approaching a small farm, and she started selling vegetables in town. Eli grew like a weed, all long limbs and endless energy, his laughter filling the house that had been silent for too long. And Clara and Caleb learned how to be married for real. Not the performance version they'd perfected for the trial, but the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of 2 damaged people choosing each other every single day. There were still hard moments. Caleb woke up sometimes in the middle of the night, panicked, convinced he'd lost them. Clara had days where the memory of those desperate weeks on the road came back so vividly she couldn't breathe. But they learned to weather those moments together instead of alone. One evening, nearly a year after that first desperate night when Clara had collapsed on the porch, she stood in the kitchen making dinner and felt Caleb's arms wrap around her from behind. "What's this for?" she asked, leaning back into him. "No reason, just wanted to." She turned in his arms, studying his face. The hard edges had softened over the past year. He smiled more, laughed occasionally. The haunted look had faded, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Letting us in? Everything that came after?" Caleb was quiet for a moment, considering seriously. "Sometimes I think about how much simpler life was before you showed up. Quieter. Safer." He paused. "And then I think about what I'd be missing if I'd turned you away. Eli learning to rope. You singing off-key while you cook. Waking up next to you. Having a reason to care about tomorrow instead of just surviving it." His hand came up to cup her face. "So no, I don't regret it. Not even a little." Clara kissed him, soft and slow. "Good. Because you're stuck with us now. Wouldn't have it any other way." The sound of small feet thundering down the stairs interrupted them. Eli burst into the kitchen, breathless and excited. "Caleb! Papa! Miguel says one of the mares is having a foal, and I can watch if you say yes, can I please?" Caleb pretended to think about it, drawing out the suspense until Eli was practically vibrating with anticipation. "All right, but you do exactly what Miguel says. No getting in the way." "I won't, I promise." Eli hugged Clara quickly, then Caleb, then sprinted for the door. "Thank you, thank you, thank you!" He was gone in a whirlwind of noise and energy. Clara shook her head, smiling. "We're going to have our hands full with that one." "Already do," Caleb agreed. Then, casually, like he was commenting on the weather, "What would you think about giving him a brother or sister?" Clara went still. "What?" "A baby. Our baby." Caleb looked almost nervous. "I know it's fast and we're still figuring things out, but..." "Yes." He blinked. "Yes? Yes. I want that. I want a family with you. A real one. More kids, chaos, all of it." Caleb's smile was brilliant and rare and worth everything they'd been through. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, and Clara held on tight and thought about how far they'd both come. From 2 broken people on the edge of nowhere to this. A home. A family. A future. 3 years later, Clara stood on the porch watching her children play in the yard. Eli, now 7, was teaching his little sister Rose how to feed the chickens without getting pecked. Rose, barely 2, approached each bird with the fearless determination she'd inherited from both her parents. The ranch had grown into something impressive. More land, more cattle, a new barn that Caleb had built with his own hands. In town, people no longer whispered about the scandalous marriage. They'd become just another family, respected and established. Emma visited twice a month now, doting on both grandchildren with the fierce affection of someone making up for lost time. She'd reconciled somewhat with Randall, who lived in San Francisco and sent stiff, formal letters on holidays but never visited. Claire suspected he couldn't stand the reminder of everything he'd lost. She didn't care. Randall was part of a past that no longer had power over her present. Caleb emerged from the barn, sweaty from work, and caught her eye. Even now, after years of marriage, the sight of him still made her heart jump. He crossed the yard, kissed her soundly despite her laughing protests about him being filthy, then scooped up Rose, who squealed with delight. "How's my girl?" "Chickens, Papa. Big chickens." "Yeah, you gonna be a rancher like your daddy?" "Yeah." Eli ran over, grinning. "Can we go riding later? I want to show Rose the creek." "After dinner, and only if your mama says yes." Both kids turned hopeful eyes on Clara. She tried to look stern and failed completely. "After dinner. And Eli, you watch your sister every second." "I will." Later, after the children were asleep and the ranch had settled into quiet, Clara and Caleb sat on their porch like they had countless times before. The prairie stretched out before them, vast and unforgiving and beautiful in the moonlight. "You ever think about where we'd be if I'd turned you away that night?" Caleb asked. "Sometimes. Usually when I want to torture myself." And I think we'd both be alone. You'd be here, still trapped in the past. Eli and I would be—" She stopped, not wanting to finish that thought. "Somewhere worse, or nowhere at all." Caleb pulled her closer. "I was so angry when you showed up. Angry at the universe for dropping another problem on my doorstep. Another person to care about and potentially lose. And now? Now I'm grateful. To whatever force or luck or coincidence brought you here." He kissed her temple. "You saved me as much as I saved you. Maybe more." Clara thought about that. About two desperate people finding each other at exactly the right moment. About the family they'd built from survival and spite and eventually love. About how the worst moments of her life had led directly to the best. "You know what I learned from all this?" she said. "What?" "That family isn't about blood or legal documents or perfect timing. It's about the people who show up when you're dying on the side of the road and decide you're worth saving. It's about choosing each other every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." "That's pretty wise for someone who once tried to steal bread from the general store." Clara laughed and elbowed him. "I was desperate." "I know. I'm just saying we've come a long way." "Yeah, we have." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge one by one across the vast Montana sky. Somewhere inside, their children slept safe and warm. Around them, the ranch hummed with quiet life. Horses in the stable, cattle in distant fields, land that had been barren now full of purpose. This was what they'd fought for. Not just custody or legal protection or survival, but this. The ordinary, precious, hard-won reality of a family that chose itself. Clara Mercer, who'd once been Clara Whitmore, who'd been lost and alone and certain she'd die on the frontier, was home. Really home. With a husband who'd learned how to love again and children who'd never know anything but being wanted. And Caleb Mercer, who'd spent 6 years convinced his heart was dead, had discovered something remarkable. You could lose everything and still find a reason to build something new. The ghosts of Sarah and Emma would always be part of him, but they no longer haunted him. They'd made room for Clara and Eli and Rose and whatever future still waited. "I love you," Clara said quietly. "I love you too." Simple words. But they'd earned them. Every syllable paid for with struggle and fear and the terrifying courage of two people who'd refused to give up on each other. The frontier had taught them both that survival required more than strength or stubbornness. It required the ability to accept help when it came, to build connections instead of walls, to risk loving again even after loss had tried to destroy you. Some people would say their story was unlikely, a marriage of convenience that became real love, a widow and an orphan saved by a broken rancher who didn't believe in second chances. But unlikely things happened every day on the frontier. The whole territory was built by people who'd lost everything and decided to try anyway. Clara and Caleb were just two more names in that long history of survivors who became something more, who proved that the strongest families weren't born, they were forged in the fire of shared struggle, who showed that love wasn't always a lightning bolt or a fairy tale, Sometimes it was just two people standing together at the edge of nowhere and deciding that together was enough. Years would pass, the children would grow, the ranch would expand. Emma would eventually pass away, leaving tearful grandchildren who'd treasure her stories. New challenges would come: drought, hard winters, the changing world creeping even into Montana's wild spaces. But through it all, the foundation held. The family they'd built from desperation and determination and eventual devotion remained solid. Because they'd learned the most important lesson the frontier had to teach. You didn't survive by being perfect. You survived by refusing to quit, by showing up for the people you loved even when it was hard, by building something worth protecting and then protecting it with everything you had. And in the end, that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.